move away from America and talk a little bit about India in the context of some of the issues that you spoke of. And India's actually emerged as a silver lining in many of these issues, whether it is trying to bring down regulation or it is allowing startups to flourish and so on and so forth. How do you view India today in the context of the hypothesis that you've laid out?
Yeah, so firstly, I was very vocal about this, which is that no matter what my political views may be, from an economic standpoint, I was all with the government for not having gone crazy on stimulus in 2020-21. There were a lot of people here who wanted this government as well, clamor to go out, stimulate, you need to do more, and stuff like that, like a huge clamor. And I was like, no, that's just not the right thing to do. Partly because we are not, in terms of, we're not America anyway with a reserve currency, and the few emerging markets which tried to do that ran into trouble subsequently. The Brazils and other countries, which ran into trouble by doing too much stimulus. So first, it was a sensible thing to do to not go and have crazy on like stimulus back then. Secondly, India's trajectory broadly, from an economic freedom standpoint, has been positive. Now, my frustration has always been on how much more can happen, right? In terms of the fact is that it's still a country where privatization is absent. Whatever privatization we see in this country is by malign neglect, which is that in every sector you sort of, like the public sector is allowed to slowly diminish and lose value, while the private sector, and we've seen this historically from telecom to airlines and stuff like that, the private sector keeps gaining share. It's almost like a free cakewalk from them. In the hospital industry, something similar is happening now. That, you literally have. It happened earlier in banking to some extent. So I think that that's the whole idea, that currently, for example, I wish there was more that we could do. But broadly, the trajectory we've been on the last 30 to 40 years has been positive. And the results are there for us to see, which is that we are not sort of voting to go back to what the 1970s and 80s are. Yes, there is talk in India on how to better design the safety net. Like, are the benefits really reaching the end person? How much has digitization helped and not helped do that? I think those are legitimate debates. But broadly, I would say that the economic trajectory, as far as India is concerned, is something that I feel good about. Now, there are... And my only frustration is how much more could be done.
I'll get to the unfinished business in just a second, but one of the other aspects, in the context of debt and deficits that we were speaking of, and that's again positive for India, because the government has been meaningfully trying to cut down on both the debt and deficit. And I think that this is something that you point out as well, that beyond the rhetoric of saying that, look, we're going to be going out there and spending more, doing much more on welfare, actually, that there has been expenditure compression and the talk doesn't really match the numbers, which is not a bad thing entirely, because there has been much more restraint on the part of the Indian government.
Yes, like I'd say that broadly that's fine. I'd think that in terms of the fiscal side, the macroeconomic management side, whether it's inflation, debt or deficits, I think that, in terms of the numbers look relatively good. The problems we have are much more on the micromanagement side. The macro, in terms of as far as India is concerned, in terms of there's nothing that I can say, like in terms of it's done really well. The issues which we can speak about is at the micromanagement side, all the distortions which are being caused. And that is something which I have issues with. I've spoken about it.